the city of brass, an Arabian Nights epic of glory, mystery, and fate in the heart of the ancient Arabian deserts, where the wind sings songs older than empires. There was a legend whispered among travelers, Medina al-Nuhās, the city of brass. Some swore it was nothing but a mirage, born of the heat and the mind's thirst. Others claimed it was real, a city built not by mortal hands, but by the mighty jinn, forged from solid gold and shimmering brass, hidden beyond the edge of the known world. And then there were those who said it was cursed. The tale begins in the court of the Umayyad Caliph, Abd al-Malik ibn Marwan, in Damascus. The Caliph's eyes, sharp as the falcon's, were fixed upon a scroll, a fragment of an ancient map written in a forgotten tongue. At his side stood Musab ibn Nukair, the famed governor and conqueror, a man whose life had been a string of impossible journeys. The scroll spoke of an empire long vanished, its wealth locked away in a city whose gates no man could breach, whose streets gleamed like the sun, and whose silence was deeper than the grave. The Caliph ordered MSB, "Go, seek this city, bring me proof that it exists, or return with the knowledge that even legends have their end." MSB did not travel alone. He summoned a company of warriors, scholars, poets, and holy men. Among them was the Qadi Abd al-Qumud al-Baghraq, a man of letters and scripture, whose curiosity burned as brightly as the desert sun. The caravan stretched long across the sands, its camels groaning under loads of water skins, spices, and gifts for whatever ruler might await at journey's end. The journey began under skies of blazing blue, the wind carrying with it the scent of myrrh and dust. Days turned to weeks. The sands shifted endlessly, erasing their tracks as if the desert itself wished to keep the city secret. They crossed valleys where the stones were black as night, said to have been scorched by the fires of heaven. They passed skeletons of travelers long perished, their bones bleached white by the merciless sun. A grim warning that many had sought the city, but none had returned. One evening, under the pale light of the crescent moon, the caravan came upon the ruins of a palace half buried in sand. Columns rose like the ribs of a long-dead giant. At its heart, they found an inscription carved in brass, the letters twisting in a language none but Abd al-Qumud could partly read. Here stood the gate of the mighty. Turn back, for none may pass. They pressed on. By the third month, they reached a place where the desert floor glittered strangely. At first they thought it was water, but as they drew near, they found themselves treading upon a plain covered in fragments of green glass, each shard catching the sunlight like a gem. Abd al-Qumud whispered that it was the site of a battle between the armies of Suleiman ibn Dbd, Solomon, son of David, and a host of rebellious jinn. The glass was all that remained of the jinn's weapons, turned to molten sand by divine fire. It was here that the first of the strange omens appeared. A camel in the rear of the caravan screamed and bolted. Its handler swore he saw a shadow, no beast, no man, sliding across the sand. That night, the wind carried whispers, voices speaking in Arabic, Persian, and tongues far older, though no figure could be seen. The men prayed. The women in the caravan clutched their amulets tighter. The caravan's water skins were running low when they spotted smoke far ahead, curling up like a thread into the sky. At first, the warriors reached for their swords, fearing raiders. But as they drew closer, they found only a lone figure, an old man wrapped in rags the color of the sand, sitting cross-legged beside a small fire. His skin was leathered by the sun, his beard white as salt, his eyes burning with a strange light. This was the Exide, the desert hermit. When they asked his name, he only said Ismc el-Yatam. My name does not matter. His voice was like dry wind through palm fronds. He claimed to have walked the desert for 90 years without ever leaving it. Over a bowl of bitter camel milk, the hermit told them what he had seen. South of here, there is a river without water, a river that once flowed with molten copper. It was there that the people of the city forged their gates, their spears, and their idols. But they angered all, and the angels sealed the river's mouth. Now, it lies dry, its bed shining red like blood under the sun. He warned them of the bronze sentinel, a statue said to stand at the edge of the city's domain, taller than 10 men, its eyes made of onyx, its hands poised as if to strike. If the wind moves through its mouth, the hermit said, you will hear a horn. If you hear the horn, do not move, for the gates will be watching. Some of the men scoffed, calling it a tale for children. But Abd al-Qumud knew that in the writings of Al-Kabark and the storytellers of Basra, such warnings were never without root. They found the river of copper 3 days later. The air above it shimmered with heat. The stones along its banks were streaked green and red, their edges jagged from long cooling. Here and there, lumps of pure copper jutted from the sand like bones from a grave. The mules grew restless. The camels refused to drink from the brackish pools that had gathered in shallow pits. Abd al-Kamad knelt, running his fingers over the metal seams in the earth. He whispered a verse from the Arabian Wallan, Lahu al-Wad, and we softened for him David iron. If the Lord had given the prophet David mastery over metal, then perhaps here was a place touched by his power, or by his wrath. By the next dawn, the bronze sentinel appeared on the horizon. At first, it seemed like a tower, its shape wavering in the morning haze. But as they drew near, its form sharpened, a warrior in full armor, its face hidden beneath a helm of hammered brass. The plates chased with script and flowing Kufic, its arms were bare, each muscle cast in perfect form. The eyes were polished black stone, reflecting the sun like two dark mirrors. Wind whistled through the statue's mouth. The sound was not a scream, nor a sigh. It was a horn, deep and low, carrying across the empty plain. The horses reared. One camel bolted into the dunes and vanished. The men clutched their amulets, muttering Bismillah again and again. Aspa ibn Nukair raised his hand, signaling silence. The sound faded. The statue stood unmoving, but its gaze seemed to follow them. Beyond the sentinel lay a stretch of land unlike any they had crossed before. The sand was flecked with metal filings that glittered like stars under the high sun. The air was unnaturally still. Even the wind had stopped, as though the desert itself was holding its breath. Beyond the bronze sentinel, the desert changed. The dunes became smaller, their crests edged with blackened glass, as though fire had once swept through here. Bits of pottery, green glazed and fractured, jutted from the sand. Some bore faint inscriptions in ancient Arabic, al-Mulk Lila, the kingdom belongs to God. For 3 days they marched without finding shade. The men began to see shapes in the air, a minaret rising and melting away, a line of date palms vanishing into nothing. Only when the moon was high did they hear the first sound other than their own footsteps. A faint metallic chime, like chains stirred by a hand. They followed the sound until they found it. A great chain, each link as large as a man's chest, running from the sand straight up into darkness. No one could see where it began or ended. It was warm to the touch, though the night was cool. MSB Ibn Nukair commanded they leave it undisturbed, fearing it was a tether binding something best left in the deep earth. That night, Abd al-Kamad dreamt of a city whose gates were shut tight, a hand of bronze gripping the chain like a leash. When he awoke, the chain was gone, swallowed by the desert, as if it had never been there. By the 4th day, they reached the ridge the hermit had spoken of. From its crest, the view stopped their breath. Towers of brass, their domes reflecting the sun like molten fire, rose from the desert floor. High walls encircled them, their surfaces carved with endless patterns of leaves and script. This was no mirage. The city of brass lay before them. Between them and its walls stretched a field of strange shapes. At first, they thought them boulders, but as they drew closer, they saw they were not stones. They were people, men and women, children and elders, all cast in pure metal, frozen mid-step. Some shielded their eyes as if from blinding light. Others reached toward the gates with hands outstretched. Their faces were locked in expressions of awe, fear, or despair. Even their garments had been captured in perfect detail, down to the weave of the cloth. Kad Kudiya Alamar, the matter has been decreed, whispered one of the soldiers. The gates were the height of 10 men, their surface hammered smooth, their edges bound in copper. Along the lintel ran words in flowing script, Tilka Jait al-Natilhan Aleka Bilkak. These are the signs of God, which we recite to you in truth. Beside the gate stood a single figure, taller than any man, clad in armor of polished brass, holding a spear whose tip was as long as a man's arm. Unlike the sentinel in the desert, this figure's head was bowed, as if asleep. When Masb ibn Nukair stepped forward, the gates groaned and parted just enough to reveal a narrow path inward. No one had touched them. They seemed to move of their own accord. The air that spilled out was cool, carrying the faint scent of jasmine and dust. Inside, the streets were paved with stone as smooth as glass. Rows of houses, their doors studded with bronze nails, lined the lanes. Water trickled somewhere, though no source was visible. And yet, there was no movement, no voice, no footstep. In the heart of the city, they came to a great plaza. In its center rose a fountain of black marble, shaped like a lion, water spilling from its jaws. Around it lay treasures beyond measure. Heaps of gold coins stamped with faces no one recognized, bowls of turquoise and carnelian, bolts of silk that shimmered even in the dim light. And there, seated upon a throne of beaten gold, was the queen. Her skin was the color of polished bronze, her robe studded with jewels the size of quail eggs. A crown rested upon her brow and her eyes. Her eyes were emeralds, catching the faintest light. She did not move. For a long while, none dared approach. Finally, Abd al-Kamad stepped forward and touched her arm. She was cold, and the sound that came from beneath her skin was not the sound of flesh, but of metal. She was a statue, perfect in form, lifelike beyond belief, yet utterly without breath. On the base of the throne was inscribed, Hadihi al-Mamlaka kanat li malika fahrin, fakad ahada, al-ha'arahau wa tarak, jasedahu, ibra lil glamkin. This kingdom belonged to a proud king. God took his soul and left his body as a lesson for the worlds. They searched the plaza in silence. Every corner they turned revealed more figures, merchants mid-bargain, guards in mid-step, children holding bread still warm in their petrified hands. The entire city had been frozen in a single breath. On one wall of the plaza, Abd al-Kamad found a bronze door unlike any other. Its surface was inscribed with alternating bands of geometric design and ancient script that was neither fully Arabic nor entirely Nabatean. With a great effort, they forced it open, revealing a long hall lined with copper lamps still filled with hardened oil. At its end sat a long table, upon which lay scrolls of parchment so brittle they crumbled to dust when touched. One, half-preserved, bore a warning in flowing hand. Ina md kuntum ta buderna minute dini. Al halisalakum rizq. What you worship besides God cannot provide for you. They descended into the lower chambers, where the air grew cool and the walls glistened with condensation. Here, the city's reservoirs lay, vast cisterns carved into the rock, their surfaces lined with brass sheets. Yet one reservoir was different. Instead of water, it held a strange, sluggish liquid the color of molten copper. Its surface shimmered in the lamplight, and at its center floated a single disk of black stone, perfectly round, as if defying the liquid's pull. Abd al-Kamad cautioned the men not to touch it, recalling the words of a desert imam he had once met. Efkuli dahab fitna, wa efkuli inshar fitna. In every gold there is a trial, and in every fire a trial. In the southern quarter, they found a great library. Shelves of teak and cedar stood row upon row, though most of the books had been eaten away by centuries. Here and there, a title could still be read. Treatises on astronomy, maps of seas long forgotten, scrolls on the making of glass that shone like ice. On a low pedestal lay an astrolabe of pure silver, engraved with constellations in minute detail. Musbeh bin Ukair lifted it, murmuring that such an instrument could chart not only the desert's paths, but the very movements of the heavens. Yet beneath the astrolabe was another inscription, in stern, unornamented hand, Wa alamnahu, md lam yakun, ya lam, and we taught him what he did not know. That night, they made camp in the great hall of the city's palace. The walls were covered in frescoes depicting caravans heavy with goods, feasts under jeweled lanterns, and battles fought with scimitars, whose blades glowed in the sun. But the last panel was different. A dark sky, a single star falling toward the earth, and the people of the city looking up in terror. In the foreground stood the queen, her crown in her hands, as if offering it upward. Abd al-Kamad sat for a long time before the image, tracing the lines with his eyes. Hadib el-Yakun, il-Wadan. This can only be a warning, he whispered. At dawn, they explored the outer districts. There they found the dried-up river of copper the hermit had spoken of, a channel wider than a man's height, its bed lined with rivulets of oxidized metal. The surface glinted green-blue in the morning light, as though the earth itself had bled bronze. Here they also found the bronze sentinel's twin, but this one was shattered, its chest split open to reveal a hollow space where something had once been stored. Scattered about were fragments of carved crystal and steel, so finely wrought it could only have been forged by a master. Finally, in the deepest heart of the palace, they reached the throne of the Caliph, not the queen's seat, but a second, larger throne of solid brass, inlaid with silver verses. Upon it lay no figure, only a great book bound in iron. When they opened it, the pages were sheets of beaten gold, upon which words were engraved in Kufic script. The first line read, Hadeb, Kitbo, al-Iber, Mankarahu Faliyataki, al-Ha. This is the book of lessons. Whoever reads it, let him fear God. The final page was blank, save for a single, fresh line scratched into the metal. Al-Baby Sayuglak, wa man yakhruj, la yadidi. The gate will close, and whoever leaves shall not return. Before they could speak, the great gates at the city's edge began to groan. From every corner, the wind rose, carrying with it the scent of dust and the faint chime of unseen chains. Musbeh ibn Ukair gave the order to leave. As they passed through the plaza, Abd al-Kamad looked back once. and saw the queen's eyes, those emerald stones, glint as if catching one last light, and then the gates shut. They did not speak for the first league. Each man rode with eyes fixed on the horizon, yet all felt the weight of what they had left behind. The sand seemed different now, coarser, as if mixed with ground metal, and the sun bore down with a sharpness that pierced cloth and skin alike. By midday, they reached the shade of a basalt outcrop, where Musab ibn Nukair called for a halt. Here Abd el-Kamad drew water from a goatskin, but the taste was bitter, not brackish, but metallic, like copper coins left in the mouth. He spat it out, frowning. One of the Berber guides muttered an old saying, tarak al-bur, ila akash. When blessing departs, only thirst remains. That night, they made camp in a gorge. The wind here moved in strange patterns, whistling in low tones that almost formed words. Abd al-Kamad could not sleep. He sat by the embers of the fire and thought he saw shapes on the ridge above, tall, unmoving, like statues. But when he looked again, they were gone. In the morning, the camel drivers swore they had seen lights in the distance during the night, pale green flames that burned without smoke. None approached them. 3 days later, a storm overtook them. The wind howled like a beast, and the sand came in waves so thick they could not see the camel ahead of them. For hours they stumbled blind until the storm broke, revealing a land none recognized. It was here they met the first survivor. He was an old man, his skin like parchment, his beard long and white. His clothes were in the style of Yemen, a century past. He spoke in a voice cracked by thirst, asking them if the city of brass still stood. When told it did, though lifeless, he wept, saying he had been a boy when his caravan sought it, only to be scattered by a great wind. He told of a time when the city's gates were open, when merchants entered and left freely, but the rulers, in their pride, defied the will of God, and a curse fell upon them. Those who fled before the curse found themselves wandering deserts that shifted in a single night. He had been wandering ever since. Around the fire the old man spoke of other cities. Iram of the pillars swallowed by sand, Zafr, where the sea turned black, and Jabal el-Anchar, the mountain of fire whose peak glowed red, though no one dared approach. Each tale ended the same way, with people turning from justice, growing proud, and being abandoned by God. Innaol, Ila, Yugafiru, Analistik, he said. God does not forgive mockery. By dawn, he was gone. No tracks in the sand, no sign he had slept among them. The days grew harsher. The heat burned their lips and eyes. Camels collapsed without warning, and waterskins grew light too quickly. Yet stranger still were the signs that the desert was not empty. The print of sandals in places. No caravan could pass. The smell of rosewater on the wind, a half-buried coin stamped with a queen's face none could name. Once they came upon a line of stones, 30 in number, each carved with a verse in early Kufic script, warning against greed and boasting. The last stone bore only a hand pointing east. Following the eastward hand, they entered a wadi where date palms grew, despite no visible water. Here they encountered a group of black-robed travelers, men and women with eyes rimmed in kohl, who claimed to be from a place called Madinat al-Layl, the city of night. Their leader, a tall woman with a voice like steel striking stone, warned them, "You have looked upon what should remain hidden. The desert will follow you now." She offered them no water, no food, only a strip of cloth dyed deep crimson, marked with the outline of a single gate. "When the dreams begin," she said, "tie this to your arm, and perhaps you will wake." Dreams did come. On the 10th night after leaving the city of brass, Musab ibn Nukair dreamed he stood once more before the queen, her emerald eyes alive. She offered him a crown heavy with jewels, but when he reached for it, it turned to dust. Others dreamed of gates opening into darkness, of rivers running with molten gold, of voices reciting verses in empty streets. Each woke with the taste of metal in their mouths. Finally, after many weeks, they saw the mountains that marked the edge of their own lands. The air grew cooler, the wind softer, yet none of them spoke of relief, for each man knew they had brought something back with them, not gold or jewels, but a shadow. Abd el-Kamad, writing by the fire on their last night in the desert, ended his account with these words: Almadna Geral Kadira el-Tabard, Inim Tantazir, the city that is not present does not perish, it only waits. The morning after they sighted the mountains, the sky was an unsettling shade, a pale brass, as though the desert itself had taken the color of the city they had left behind. A wind rose from the east, carrying with it a low, humming vibration that made the camels uneasy. They reached a dry riverbed by midday. Its bed was littered with strange, pitted stones, some greenish, others a deep red, as if they had been melted and cooled again. Abd al-Kamad recognized them from travelers' tales. Why are al-Nuhās, stones of copper, said to mark places where lightning had struck with the fury of 1,000 storms. But here, the riverbed stretched for miles, its surface glinting faintly under the sun. It was as if an entire river of copper had once flowed and hardened in place. The Berbers avoided walking directly on it, muttering Quranic verses under their breath. A vulture circled above, silent and watchful. Yet when they looked closely, it was not a vulture, but a bird of brilliant white feathers, its wings longer than any eagle they had seen. It kept its distance but never left their sight, appearing at each new camp as though guiding or following them. That night, the white bird perched on a boulder a short distance from camp. The moonlight turned its feathers silver, and its eyes shone like polished obsidian. At dawn it was gone, but in the sand where it had stood was the imprint of a single human foot, pointing toward the mountains. The journey became a blur of omens. They found a half-buried wall carved with the Shada, in letters so large a man could stand within the curve of a single olive. They passed an abandoned tent whose ropes were still taut, though no pole remained. Inside, a bowl of dates lay untouched, each fruit perfectly preserved yet dry as dust. When bitten, the men spoke less and less, as if speech might draw the desert's attention. Only at night did they murmur prayers together, sitting in a tight circle like castaways clinging to the last scrap of a raft. One evening, they stumbled upon the remains of a caravan station. Its stone arches still stood, and the outline of the prayer niche faced perfectly toward Mecca. The ground inside was littered with fragments of glazed pottery and rusted From the shadows emerged a man in the patched robes of a fakir. His eyes were so pale they seemed blind, yet he walked unerringly toward Masbet al-Ada ta'milu mhua athakal minal dahab, he said. The return carries what is heavier than gold. When asked his name, he only smiled and replied Sebek, meaning the one who goes ahead. By morning, he too was gone, leaving only the impression of his knees in the dust where he had prayed. The closer they came to the mountains, the more the land seemed to shift. Paths they had taken before now veered away into canyons, and familiar rock formations appeared in unfamiliar places. Twice, they found their own footprints from days past, though they had not turned back. On the last night in the open desert, the dreams returned. Stronger, every man saw the same vision. The gates of the city of brass, wide open, the queen standing within, beckoning them. Behind her, the streets were no longer empty. They teemed with silent people whose faces were hidden behind veils of gold. When they awoke, each man found a grain of fine yellow dust in his palm. Though their camp had been far from any dune, the mountains offered no rest. A cold wind poured through the passes, carrying the faint scent of frankincense. The sky here seemed cleaner, yet the men rode with the air of those who had crossed into another realm entirely. On the 7th day after entering the mountain passes, they reached the green valleys that mark the edge of their own territories. Children ran alongside the caravan, shouting in delight at their return, yet not one of the men smiled. They carried no treasure, no artifacts, only the burden of what they had seen, and the unshakable feeling that somewhere, just beyond the edge of sight, the city of brass was still watching them. Español de España dismounted at the first village and prayed long into the afternoon. When he arose, he gave only one order to his scribes: do not draw the map again. The return of Msb ibn Nukair's caravan was not greeted with the fanfare the people had expected. Word had spread weeks before that they had set out to find al-Madinat al-Kufra, the city of brass, and so the crowds anticipated wagons laden with gold, exotic slaves, and relics from the time of Sultan. But when they rode through the city gates, the onlookers saw only weary men, eyes shadowed, lips tight. Their armor bore the fine scratches of wind-blown sand. Their banners were faded almost to nothing, and there was no gold, only sealed chests that Msab ordered taken directly into the palace treasury, guarded by soldiers who spoke to no one. The Dulk's court demanded an accounting. Jurists, scribes, and merchants pressed for details. Where were the treasures? What became of the fabled brass gates? MSB gave a report so sparse it bordered on insult. A fortified city, abandoned, statues of strange design, nothing of value for the markets. But his closest companions noticed a strange omission. He made no mention of the queen, the automaton guardians, or the sealed scroll they had found in the deepest hall. That scroll now lay locked in a coffer in his private quarters, its writing still faintly luminous when viewed at night. He had tried 3 times to destroy it, once by fire, once by blade, once by throwing it into the furnace used for minting coins. Each time, it emerged unscathed, its script glowing faintly, the letters twisting into shapes unfamiliar to any known Arabic calligraphy. The court imams debated whether it was ilm al-Anbib, knowledge from the prophets, or a dangerous remnant of the Sir al-Qadam, the old magic. The returning men did not go back to normal life. Several were seen wandering the streets at night, barefoot, as though searching for something. One man began to carve elaborate geometric patterns into the wooden doors of houses, the designs echoing the ones they had seen on the walls of the city of brass. In the bazaar, a jeweler found that a small brass bead he had taken from the sand outside the city gates, never tarnished and never cooled, as if a slow fire burned inside it. Children claimed to see the white bird from the desert perched on the palace roof at dawn, its black eyes fixed on the governor's chamber. Whispers grew in the court. Perhaps MSB had found treasure but kept it hidden, fearing it might strengthen rivals in Damascus. Delegations arrived from the Umayyad Caliph's envoys, pressing for a full inventory. One night, MSB summoned only his most trusted men, those who had crossed the final dunes with him, and spoke plainly. Some wealth is a curse. Some knowledge is a weapon that cuts its wielder first. He ordered the chests sealed again, to be buried deep beneath the palace foundations with no marker. The scroll, however, he kept, claiming it was his duty to guard it until the rightful interpreter could be found. Over the next months, every man who had entered the city began to change. Some aged rapidly, their beards turning white within a single season. Others fell silent and took 2 long walks beyond the city walls, staring at the horizon as though expecting something to emerge. One by one, they died. But their bodies did not decay as quickly as others. The physicians noted it in hushed tones. They remained preserved, like figures cast in metal. Long after MSB Ibn Ukir's death, during renovations of the palace, workers uncovered a section of wall, carved with intricate brass panels no one remembered being built. The designs matched the ones from the city, though none of the current generation had seen them. When they pried one panel loose, they found an empty chamber behind it, except for a single golden veil, folded neatly, and a feather white as snow. The master mason swore that as he turned to leave, he heard a woman's voice, clear and soft, speaking in an old dialect of Arabic. The gates are still open, but only for those who remember the path. To this day, in the vast deserts south of Kairan, travelers speak of strange mirages at dusk, towers of bronze glinting in the last light, a white bird circling high above, and the sound of a woman's laughter carried on the wind. Some claim the city of brass was never a place but a test, a boundary between the realm of man and something older, deeper, and patient. Others say it still waits, gates sealed, watching the sands shift century after century until the right hands, or the wrong ones, return. And perhaps, somewhere beneath the palace, in a sealed coffer, the scroll still glows in the dark. And so, the gates of the city of brass closed once more, not with the clamor of battle, nor the roar of conquest, but with the quiet finality of forgotten time. The desert reclaimed its secret, the golden towers sinking beneath the dunes, as if they had never been. Yet somewhere beyond the horizon, in a place where the sand burns like embers at dusk, there are whispers that the city still waits, not for enchanters, not for kings, but for those who carry the courage to face what truth may cost. The caravan's path fades into the distance, each hoofprint already erased by the shifting wind, and the tale drifts from voice to voice, century to century, until it has reached you. And perhaps, one night, when the stars above gleam like hammered brass, you too will feel the pull of that unseen gate, calling you into another legend. For in this world, the greatest cities are not built in stone, but in stories. And the city of brass is one that will never let you go.